The instant humans walked away, fear gripped the Galactic Council part. Commander Allison Wright took a deep breath as she stood at the podium. The massive chamber of the Galactic Council stretched before her. Alien faces of every color, shape, and form looked back at her. Some had multiple eyes. Others had no eyes at all. Some breathed air. Others breathed liquid or gas mixtures that would kill a human in seconds. But they all understood the universal translator that carried her words to every corner of the Great Hall. Behind her stood the three other members of the human delegation. Admiral Frank Bennett, a tall man with gray hair and stern blue eyes, kept his hands clasped behind his back. His military uniform displayed the insignia of Earth's United Forces. Next to him, Science Director Olivia Jackson adjusted her glasses nervously. Her dark skin contrasted with her white lab coat. On the end stood Daniel Carter from the Diplomatic Corps. His face remained perfectly neutral, though his fingers tapped slightly against his leg. For 30 years, Wright said, her voice strong and clear, humanity has been a loyal member of this galactic confederation. For 30 years, we have contributed our resources, our innovations, and our military strength to support the greater community of spacefaring civilizations. The aliens listened quietly. In the center of the chamber, the High Counselor watched from an elevated platform. The High Counselor belonged to the Zentari species, tall, willowy beings with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. And for 30 years, Wright continued, we have asked for help against the Krivik attacks on our outer colonies. 30 years of watching our people die while this council debates, forms committees, and ultimately does nothing. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The colony of New Portland was destroyed 3 months ago. 150,000 human lives lost. And still this council voted against military action. The High Counselor leaned forward. Commander Wright, the situation is complex. The Krivik Dominion has assured us that the attack was carried out by rogue elements within their... With respect, High Counselor, Wright interrupted. We've heard these excuses before. The evidence we presented proved official Krivik involvement. Your own investigators confirmed our findings. One of the smaller alien delegates, a reptilian being with bright orange scales, stood up. The human delegation must understand that direct conflict with the Krivik would threaten the peace of 17 sectors. Wright looked directly at the orange alien. And what about the peace of human sectors? Do our lives matter less? Silence fell over the chamber. Wright looked down at her datapad for a moment, then back up at the assembled delegates. As Supreme Commander of Earth's United Defense Forces, I am authorized to deliver this message. As of this moment, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Confederation. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates jumped to their feet. Some shouted. Others made sounds that the translator couldn't properly convert. The High Counselor's eyes widened in shock. Commander Wright. The High Counselor raised his voice above the chaos. This is unprecedented. No species has ever withdrawn from the Confederation in its 10,000-year history. Wright nodded. Then we will be the first. Admiral Bennett stepped forward. All human military forces have been ordered to withdraw from Confederation joint operations, effective immediately. Science Director Jackson spoke next. All technology sharing programs are suspended. Human scientific outposts in Confederation space will be closed within the week. Daniel Carter completed the announcements. Diplomatic relations will continue through minimal channels only. Trade contracts will be honored until their expiration dates but will not be renewed. The chamber fell into stunned silence. A large delegate with 6 arms stood up slowly. But the human fleet protects nearly a quarter of Confederation borders. If you withdraw, then perhaps the Confederation should have considered that before ignoring our requests for aid, Wright said simply. The High Counselor's voice trembled slightly. Commander, surely we can discuss this further. The Council will convene an emergency session to address your concerns about the Krivik. The time for discussion ended when New Portland burned, Wright replied. She looked at her fellow delegates. We're done here. With that, the human delegation turned in perfect unison and began walking toward the massive doors at the end of the chamber. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. No one spoke. No one moved to stop them. Just before reaching the exit, Wright turned back one last time. "We truly hoped for better from the stars," she said softly. But the perfect acoustics of the chamber carried her words to every corner. The doors slid open. The humans walked through. The doors closed behind them with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud. For several seconds, no one in the chamber moved. Then a crystalline being near the front, Ambassador Jalarian of the Silicon Consciousness, made a high-pitched sound and collapsed. Its crystalline form shattered on impact with the floor, sending glittering shards across the polished surface. "They can't do this," said a tentacled delegate from the outer rim. "Can they?" The High Counselor looked down at his hands. "There is no provision in our laws to prevent it." Counselor Extra of the Valari Collective stood up, his facial tendrils quivering wildly. "Do you understand what this means? The human fleet is the only thing keeping the Krivik from pushing into the Danabian sector." "And their medical technology," added another delegate. "Half the planets in my system depend on human medical supplies. Their food production, the mining operations, the trading routes they patrol." As the implications sank in, the voices grew more panicked. The High Counselor tried to restore order, but no one was listening anymore. At the back of the chamber, a small gray alien leaned toward his neighbor. "I've studied humans for 20 cycles," he whispered. "They never make threats they don't intend to keep." His neighbor, a floating gas-filled being enclosed in a containment suit, made a sound like escaping steam. "But why now? After 30 years? "I don't know," the gray alien said. "But I find it interesting that they didn't seem angry." "What do you mean?" "In my experience, humans shout when they're angry. They argue, they demand. But did you see their faces? They were calm, almost prepared." Outside the chamber, the human delegation walked briskly down the long corridor that led to their shuttle bay. None of them spoke until they were well away from the council building. "Do you think they'll figure it out?" Daniel Carter finally asked. Commander Wright kept her eyes forward. "Eventually, but by then, it will be too late." "How much time do we have?" Admiral Bennett asked. "Based on Krivik movement patterns, 4 weeks at most before they launch their main offensive," Wright replied. "Enough time for our preparations, if everything goes according to plan." Science Director Jackson looked at a small device on her wrist. "The blackout protocols are ready. On your command, we can cut all communications with Confederation space." Wright nodded. "The moment we leave orbit." As they approached their shuttle, Wright paused to look back at the gleaming spires of the Galactic Council headquarters. For a moment, sadness crossed her face. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "you have to let people think you've abandoned them before they realize how much they needed you." The shuttle doors closed behind them, and within minutes, they were ascending toward their ship in orbit. Below them, on 1,000 worlds across the Confederation, the news was already spreading. Humanity had walked away, and nothing would ever be the same again. The instant humans walked away, fear gripped the Galactic Council part. 2 weeks passed since the human delegation walked out of the Galactic Council. The great chamber that normally hosted representatives from only the most urgent matters now held a full emergency session. Every seat was filled. Even species that rarely attended council meetings had sent their highest officials. Counselor Extra of the Valari Collective stood at the central podium, his blue tendrils quivering with agitation. The large screens behind him displayed charts with downward trends. "The economic impact has been immediate and severe," Extra said. "Human goods have vanished from markets across 17 sectors. 4 major trade hubs have declared states of emergency." A representative from the outer colonies raised a limb. "The medical situation is becoming desperate. My world received only half our usual shipment of human antibiotics last week. We've had to start rationing treatments." The High Counselor sat, slumped in his chair. The shimmering blue of his skin had dulled to a pale gray over the past days. "What about communication?" he asked. "Have we established any meaningful contact?" A communications officer stepped forward. She was one of the few humans still working with the Confederation, a specialist named Karen Davis who had chosen to remain at her post. "No, High Counselor," she said. "Most communication channels with human space went dark 3 days ago. We've sent 17 diplomatic ships toward Earth. None have returned or responded to messages." The screens behind Extra changed to show a star map. Red markers indicated human colonies and stations. "Our monitoring stations have detected unusual activity," Extra continued. "Human ships are moving in patterns we don't understand. They appear to be consolidating around their core worlds. But a significant portion of their fleet has simply disappeared from our tracking systems." Murmurs of concern spread through the chamber. "Disappeared?" asked a delegate from the methane-breathing Halosi. "How is that possible?" "Unknown," Extra admitted. "Either they've developed technology that can evade our sensors, or they've withdrawn to unexplored space." The High Counselor raised a thin hand. "Is there any sign they're preparing for war against the Confederation?" "No," said Extra. "But there's something else concerning us." The star map zoomed out to show a larger section of the galaxy. Yellow markers appeared along one edge. "These are the latest positions of Krivik ships. They've increased movement along borders previously patrolled by human fleets." The chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. "I would like to call forth our final witness," the High Counselor said. "Admiral Garrett Henry of Earth's Luna Command." The main screen switched to show the face of an older human male with weathered features and short gray hair. He wore a simple dark uniform with minimal insignia. "Admiral Henry," the High Counselor began, "as the ranking human military officer still maintaining communication with the Confederation, we request your insight into your government's actions." Henry's expression remained neutral. "I am authorized to deliver the following message. As of 0600 Galactic Standard Time today, all human space has enacted communications blackout protocols. No signals in, no signals out. I am further instructed to inform you that any unauthorized vessels attempting to enter human territory will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly." The chamber erupted in voices. The High Counselor had to strike his gavel 3 times to restore order. "Admiral Henry," said Vice Counselor Peldon of the Mavoti, standing from his seat, "surely you understand how this appears to the Council. Humanity possesses the largest military fleet in 3 sectors. Your manufacturing capabilities outstrip any 5 species combined, and now you're cutting off all contact?" Henry's face showed no emotion. "Perhaps you should have considered that before dismissing our request for aid against the Krivik." His eyes scanned the chamber. "For 30 years we warned you. The Krivik were testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. They never intended to stop with human colonies." "What are you suggesting?" the High Counselor asked. "I suggest you prepare your defenses," Henry replied, "while you still can." The screen went black. For several seconds no one spoke. Then a small delegation from a frontier world stood up. "High Counselor, we must request emergency military assistance. Without the human patrols, our system is completely exposed to Krivik territory." "As is ours," said another delegate. "And ours." Soon dozens of representatives were on their feet, all requesting protection that the Confederation fleet couldn't possibly provide. Far from the council chamber, on the border station known as Starpoint, Security Chief Matthew Rogers watched refugee ships dock one after another. The station had been built to house 5,000 people. Now it held over 12,000, with more arriving every hour. Rogers was one of the few humans who had chosen to remain in Confederation space after the withdrawal. He stood at the viewport in the main control room, watching as another damaged ship limped toward the docking bay. "That's the 3rd one today," said his assistant, a young Tellarite named Grev. The Tellarites resembled Earth bears, though smaller and with more dexterous paws. "This one's from New Andorra Colony." "Survivors?" Rogers asked. "About 200. They say the Krivik hit them without warning. 3 ships appeared, opened fire on the defense platforms, then landed troops." Grev's ears flattened against his head. "The same pattern as the others." Rogers nodded grimly. And still no response from Confederation Command? They say all available ships are defending the core systems. Rogers turned from the viewport. What I don't understand is why the EU Krivik are avoiding human space. Their attack pattern skirts around our territory completely. Maybe they're afraid? Grev suggested. The Krivik aren't afraid of anything, Rogers said, but they are smart. They know an opportunity when they see one. The station shuddered slightly as the refugee ship docked. A moment later, the communications panel lit up. Sir, said the communications officer, we're getting reports of Krivik ships approaching the Arcturus line. Rogers' face grew pale. That's impossible. The Arcturus line is too well defended. Even without human ships, the Confederation has— Sir, the officer interrupted, the reports say there are hundreds of Krivik vessels, maybe thousands. Rogers and Grev exchanged looks. The Arcturus line was the last major defense before the Confederation core worlds. If it fell, send a message to command, Rogers said. Tell them. He paused, then shook his head. Never mind. It's too late for messages. In the council chamber, the emergency session had turned chaotic. Reports of Krivik attacks flooded in from all directions. The star map behind the podium now showed red alerts across dozens of systems. The High Counselor stood at the center of the storm, his voice barely audible above the noise. We must evacuate the border worlds. Pull back to defensible positions. The doors burst open. A messenger bleeding from a head wound stumbled into the chamber. The Arcturus line has fallen, the messenger gasped. The Krivik broke through without losing a single ship. They'll reach the core worlds within days. As panic spread through the chamber, the High Counselor sank back into his chair. He thought about Commander Wright and the human delegation, walking calmly through those doors 2 weeks ago. Had they known this would happen? Had they abandoned the Confederation to its fate? Or was there something else at work, something he was missing? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The Confederation now faced extinction, and humanity was nowhere to be found. The instant humans walked away, fear gripped the Galactic Council. Part 3. A month had passed since humanity withdrew from the Galactic Confederation. The Krivik invasion continued without pause. 27 worlds had fallen, millions of refugees, crowded safe zones that grew less safe by the day. On Starpoint Station, Security Chief Matthew Rogers no longer slept. Dark circles hung under his eyes as he coordinated the movement of civilians through the overcrowded corridors. The station, designed for 5,000, now held over 30,000 desperate beings from a dozen different species. We can't take any more, Grev said, his furry face showing rare signs of stress. Life support is at 150% capacity. Food stores will last 3 more days at best. Rogers nodded tiredly. I know, but what am I supposed to do? Turn them away? They stood in the main control room watching as another damaged ship approached the docking bay. This one limped along on minimal power, its hull scorched black in several places. That's the 5th refugee ship today, Rogers said. Where's this one from? Grev checked his datapad. Proxima Colony. Rogers looked up sharply. Proxima, that's only 2 jumps from here. A chill went through the control room. If the Krivik had taken Proxima, they were advancing faster than anyone had predicted. The communications panel lit up. Security Chief, said the young officer monitoring the system. I'm picking up a signal on a restricted frequency. Restricted? Rogers frowned. Let me hear it. The officer tapped a few controls. A voice came through the speakers. A human voice. Starpoint Station, this is Captain Samantha Curtis of the Earth vessel Horizon. Please respond on this channel only. Rogers' heart jumped. He hadn't heard from any human ships in weeks. This is Rogers, he answered. Captain Curtis, what's your status? Classified, came the reply. Matt, I need you at Docking Bay 12 in 20 minutes. Bring anyone you trust, and don't tell anyone else I'm coming. The communication ended before Rogers could ask questions. Who was that? Grev asked. Rogers looked at his assistant for a long moment. Someone I served with in the Earth fleet before I transferred to Confederation security. He made a quick decision. Grev, I need you to come with me, and we need to quietly spread the word to any humans still on this station. 20 minutes. Later, Rogers and Grev stood in the nearly empty docking bay 12. With them were 14 humans and 3 aliens who had worked closely with Rogers over the past months. Are you sure about this? Asked a woman named Lisa Chen, who ran the station's medical bay. If the Krivik attack while we're gone, they're going to attack anyway, Rogers said. Proxima has fallen. We're next. A soft hum filled the bay as a ship approached. It wasn't large, designed for perhaps 30 passengers, and bore no markings of any kind. It docked smoothly, and the airlock cycled open. Captain Samantha Curtis stepped out. She wore a plain gray uniform without insignia. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes quickly scanned the small group. This everyone? She asked Rogers. He nodded. Everyone I could trust with short notice. It'll have to do. Get aboard, quickly. We launch in 3 minutes. As they boarded the ship, Grev hung back nervously. I'm not human, he said to Curtis. Is that a problem? Curtis smiled slightly. Not at all. In fact, it's essential. Once everyone was aboard, Curtis sealed the airlock and headed for the bridge. Rogers followed her. Sam, what's going on? He asked as they walked through the narrow corridors. Where have you been? Where are all the human ships? Curtis didn't slow down. You'll get answers soon. Right now we need to get out of here before the Krivik arrive. The Krivik? Rogers grabbed her arm. They're coming here when? Curtis glanced at her watch. About 15 minutes. On the bridge, Curtis took the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. Through the view screen, Rogers could see Starpoint Station, his home for the past 3 years. We can't just leave, he said. There are 30,000 refugees on that station. We've already sent evacuation ships for them, Curtis replied, her fingers flying over the controls. They should arrive any minute. Evacuation ships? From where? The Confederation fleet is in ruins. Curtis didn't answer. The ship detached from the docking clamps and moved away from the station at surprising speed. Sam, Rogers said more firmly. What is going on? Where are we going? Curtis finally looked up at him. Home, she said simply. The blackout is ending. The ship accelerated smoothly, much faster than should have been possible for a vessel its size. Rogers felt no increase in G-forces despite the rapid acceleration. This isn't standard Confederation tech, he said, looking around the bridge with new eyes. No, Curtis agreed. It's not. As the ship cleared the station's security perimeter, Curtis activated a control sequence. The ship shimmered briefly, then seemed to fade from view. Stealth technology? Rogers asked, surprised. Phase shift cloaking, Curtis corrected. One of many things we've been working on. The ship's sensors suddenly pinged an alarm. Curtis brought up a tactical display. Multiple red dots appeared at the edge of the system. Krivik War Fleet, she said. Right on schedule. Rogers watched in horror as the dots multiplied. Dozens, then hundreds of Krivik ships entered the system. There's no way Starpoint can survive that, he whispered. Watch, Curtis said. As the Krivik fleet approached the station, new signals appeared on the tactical display. Dozens of ships materialized near Starpoint, ships unlike any Rogers had seen before. They were sleek, with a distinctive blue glow emanating from their drive systems. Human ships, he asked. Curtis nodded. The first wave of the new fleet. The new arrivals immediately positioned themselves between the station and the Krivik forces. Evacuation vessels docked with Starpoint, beginning to transfer refugees. I don't understand, Rogers said. If we had these ships, why did we withdraw? Why let the Krivik advance so far? Because we needed them to commit their forces, Curtis explained. We needed to see their full strength, their tactics, their deployment patterns. You used the Confederation as bait, Rogers realized, his voice hollow. Curtis looked at him steadily. We gave them 30 years to listen to our warnings. They chose not to. The ship accelerated again, leaving the Starpoint system behind. Through a rear view screen, Rogers saw flashes of light as the human ships engaged the Krivik fleet. Where are we going? Grev asked, joining them on the bridge. Earth, Curtis said. Or more specifically, Luna Command. Admiral Wright wants to see you. Wright? Rogers frowned. Commander Wright was promoted? A lot has changed in a month, Matt. The ship entered a strange tunnel of blue-white light, moving in a way that Rogers had never seen before. The stars outside stretched and blurred. This isn't normal space travel, he said. No, Curtis agreed. We call it slip space. It's about 50 times faster than conventional drives. Rogers stared at her. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would require technology far beyond what the Confederation possesses. Curtis finished for him. Yes, that's rather the point. Hours later, the ship emerged from slip space near Earth. Rogers gasped at what he saw through the viewscreen. Earth looked the same, the blue-green jewel he remembered. But surrounding it was the largest collection of ships he had ever seen. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of vessels. Some were massive, easily 10 times the size of the largest Confederation dreadnought. This is what we've been building, Curtis said quietly. While the Confederation debated and formed committees while they ignored our warnings, we prepared. As they approached Luna, Rogers could see enormous construction facilities on the moon's surface. More ships were being built. There, their frames still visible. The blackout wasn't just about cutting communications, he realized. You needed to hide all this. Curtis nodded. And now we're ready to reveal it. Their ship docked at a massive station in orbit around the moon. As they disembarked, Rogers saw humans and aliens working side by side. Scientists, engineers, military, personnel, all moving with purpose. Welcome to Operation Sentinel, Curtis said. Humanity's answer to the Krivik threat, and our gift to a galaxy that's about to change forever. The instant humans walked away, fear gripped the Galactic Council part. For Rogers followed Captain Curtis through the massive lunar facility. Everywhere he looked, humans and aliens worked together on technology unlike anything he had seen in the Confederation. The walls were lined with displays showing battles taking place across dozens of star systems. How long has this been going on? Rogers asked as they walked. Operation Sentinel started 20 years ago, Curtis replied, after the first major Krivik attack on our colonies. We knew then that the Confederation would never act decisively. They entered a large circular room with a holographic display of the galaxy at its center. Around the table stood several humans in military uniforms. Rogers recognized Commander Allison Wright immediately, though she now wore the insignia of an admiral. Security. Chief Rogers, Wright said, nodding to him. Thank you for joining us, and you must be Grev, she added, looking at the Tellarite. Grev shifted nervously. Yes, Admiral. Don't be nervous, Wright said with a small smile. You're among friends here. Rogers looked around the room. Friends? You abandoned the Confederation, to be slaughtered by the Krivik. Admiral Frank Bennett, standing to Wright's right, frowned. We didn't abandon anyone, son. We're saving them. They just don't know it yet. Wright gestured to the galaxy map. The Krivik invasion has followed exactly the pattern we predicted. They've committed nearly 80% of their fleet to this offensive. She tapped a control, and the map zoomed in to show the front lines of the invasion. Red markers indicated Krivik forces pushing toward the Confederation core worlds. Every move they've made has been tracked and analyzed. Wright continued. Their command ships have been identified, their supply lines mapped, their weaknesses found. Rogers stared at the display. You could have shared this intelligence with the Confederation. We tried, said Science Director Olivia Jackson, entering the room. For 30 years, we submitted detailed reports on Krivik fleet movements, weapons capabilities, and strategic patterns. The Council buried them in committees. Because the Krivik had infiltrated the Confederation government, added Daniel Carter, the diplomatic representative. We've identified over 200 Krivik agents in positions of influence throughout the Council. Rogers felt his world shifting. That's impossible. The security screenings are outdated and ineffective against advanced Krivik biomimetic technology, Jackson interrupted. Something else we warned the Council about. Wright touched another control. The galaxy map changed to show blue markers appearing throughout Confederation space. "What are those?" asked Grev. "Human response forces," Bennett said proudly. "Going active as we speak." Rogers watched in amazement as the blue markers multiplied. "How? The human fleet isn't this large." "It is now," Wright said. "We've been building in secret for 2 decades. Ships, weapons, and defenses using technology we kept from the Confederation." "Why keep it secret from your allies?" Rogers demanded. Wright's expression hardened. "Because the Confederation isn't what you think it is. The peace they're so proud of? It was designed by the Krivik centuries ago." She nodded to Jackson, who brought up historical data on a side screen. "The Galactic Confederation is 10,000 years old," Jackson explained. "In that time, technological advancement has remained nearly stagnant. Major scientific breakthroughs mysteriously disappear. Innovative species suddenly lose interest in exploration." "The Krivik have been farming the Confederation," Carter said, bluntly. "They attack just enough to keep everyone scared but compliant. They steal resources and technology at a sustainable rate, while ensuring no species ever grows powerful enough to challenge them." Rogers shook his head in disbelief. "That's the truth," Wright said firmly. "Humanity recognized the pattern within our first decade of joining. We've spent the years since preparing our response." On the main display, the blue markers began to engage the red Krivik forces. Battle data streamed in from a dozen fronts. "Your ship," Rogers said to Curtis. "The phase shift cloaking, the slip space drive. This is what you've been developing?" Curtis nodded. "Along with quantum phase shielding, non-local communications, gravity manipulation weapons. Technologies the Krivik have been systematically suppressing throughout the Confederation." "The Krivik know about human potential," Wright said. "That's why they targeted our colonies first. They recognized the threat we posed to their farming operation." A communications officer approached Wright. "Admiral, we're ready to broadcast." Wright nodded. "Very well. Open channels to all Confederation systems." The galaxy map minimized, replaced by a view of a massive chamber. Rogers recognized it immediately, the Galactic Council chamber, now relocated to the fortress world of Bastion Prime. The remaining counselors huddled there, preparing for evacuation as Krivik forces approached. Wright stepped forward, and her image appeared on every screen in the chamber. The counselors looked up in shock. "This is Admiral Allison Wright of the United Earth Alliance," she said, her voice clear and strong. "To all Confederation citizens, help is on the way. To the Krivik forces, you have 60 seconds to begin retreat." The High Counselor, his once shimmering skin now dull gray, stared at Wright's image. "Admiral, what is the meaning of this? Where have you been?" "Preparing," Wright replied simply. On tactical displays across the chamber, new signals began to appear. Hundreds, then thousands, of vessels materializing throughout the system. The readings made no sense. The ships used propulsion technology never before seen in Confederation space. The Krivik fleet, moments ago pressing their advantage, suddenly found themselves surrounded. "Impossible," whispered the High Counselor. "Where did these ships come from?" "From Earth," Wright answered. "From Mars, from Luna and Titan and 100 other manufacturing centers we built while you debated the Krivik threat in your committees." Rogers watched as the human forces engaged the Krivik fleet. The battles were swift and decisive. Krivik weapons seemed to pass harmlessly through human ships, while human weapons cut through Krivik defenses with ease. "The quantum phase shields make conventional weapons useless against our ships," Jackson explained, seeing Rogers' amazement. "And our gravity weapons can disable their drives without destroying their vessels." "You're capturing them, not destroying them," Rogers realized. Bennett nodded. "We want prisoners, not martyrs. Each captured ship gives us more intelligence about their operations." Within hours, the situation across the galaxy had transformed. The Krivik advance halted, then reversed. Their command ships were captured or destroyed, their forces in disarray. In the council chamber, the High Counselor and remaining delegates watched in stunned silence as humanity turned the tide of a war they had been losing for months. "Why?" the High Counselor finally asked. "Why withdraw? Why let us suffer before coming to our aid?" Wright's expression softened slightly. "Sometimes the greatest catalyst for growth is the perception of abandonment. The moment we walked away, you began to change, and in that change lies the salvation of us all." Rogers looked at the tactical displays, still trying to process everything he had learned. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now," Wright said, "we rebuild the galaxy, not as a confederation where advancement is stifled, but as an alliance, where innovation is celebrated." She turned to Rogers and Grev. "That's why you're here. We need people who understand both worlds, the old confederation and the new alliance we're creating." "And the Krivik?" asked Grev. "They've been farming the galaxy long enough," Bennett said firmly. "Time for them to face the harvest." Outside the windows of the Lunar Command Center, more ships departed Earth orbit, hundreds of vessels heading to distant stars carrying not just weapons but medicine, food, and technology. "The blackout is over," Wright said. "Now the real work begins." The instant humans walked away, fear gripped the Galactic Council. Part 5. 3 months passed since humanity revealed their true plan. The Krivik invasion had been defeated. Their forces were pushed back to their home systems, contained by a blockade of human ships using the new slipspace technology. The Galactic Council chamber on Bastion Prime had been repaired. Once again, representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Hall. But the atmosphere was different now. The old sense of slow, cautious debate had been replaced by something new: energy, purpose, and hope. Rogers stood at the back of the chamber watching as Admiral Wright addressed the assembled delegates. She wore a formal uniform with the new insignia of the Galactic Alliance, a galaxy spiral with Earth's solar system marked by a small blue dot. "The transition has not been easy," Wright acknowledged. "Centuries of Krivik influence cannot be undone in a few months. But together, we have made remarkable progress." The main display behind her showed images from across the galaxy. Damaged worlds being rebuilt, new ships under construction, medical centers treating those injured in the war. "Today, I am pleased to announce that the last refugee camp has been closed," Wright continued. "All displaced persons have been either returned to their homeworlds or resettled in new communities." Applause filled the chamber. Rogers noticed how different the council looked now. The once dominant older species had been joined by newer members, species previously considered too primitive for council membership. Wright gestured to Science Director Jackson, who stepped forward. "Phase 1 of the technology sharing program is complete," Jackson reported. "Basic medical advances, clean energy systems, and agricultural improvements have been distributed to all member worlds. Phase 2 will begin next month, focusing on transportation and communications technology." Rogers felt a tug on his sleeve. Grev stood next to him, wearing the uniform of the new Alliance Diplomatic Corps. "Can you believe how much has changed?" the Tellarite asked quietly. Rogers smiled. "Sometimes I still can't." At the center of the chamber, the High Counselor rose from his seat. His blue skin had regained its shimmering quality, and he moved with renewed energy. "Admiral Wright," he said, "the Council wishes to express its formal gratitude for humanity's actions. Without your intervention, the Confederation would have fallen." Wright nodded in acknowledgement. "However," the High Counselor continued, "some questions remain. The fact that humanity concealed such technological advances from the Confederation for decades, this has created concern among some members." A murmur spread through the chamber. Rogers tensed slightly. The old politics were not entirely gone. Wright took a moment before responding. "High Counselor, we understand those concerns, but I would remind the Council that we tried for 30 years to warn you about the Krivik threat. Each time our warnings were dismissed. Our intelligence reports were ignored." She looked around the chamber. "More importantly, we discovered evidence of systematic suppression of technological advancement, a pattern that had existed for thousands of years." Wright nodded to Daniel Carter, who activated a new display. It showed a graph of technological development across different species. This pattern was clear to us, Carter explained. Every time a species approached a certain level of technological development, something happened. Key scientists disappeared. Research facilities suffered. Accidents, wars conveniently broke out. The Krivik were farming the galaxy, Wright said, keeping all species at a controlled level of development while they harvested resources and technology. The High Counselor frowned. And you believe members of the Council were complicit in this? Some were, Wright acknowledged. Others were simply manipulated. The Krivik are masters of infiltration and influence. Rogers watched as the delegates digested this information. Some looked shocked, others nodded in understanding. Wright continued. The question now is not what happened in the past, but what we build for the future. She activated a new display, plans for a massive space station at a neutral point between major alliance systems. This is the Nexus, she explained. A center for cooperative research, cultural exchange, and galactic governance, not controlled by humans or any single species but shared by all. The plan showed a structure unlike anything seen before. A massive ring-shaped station with specialized sections for different environmental needs. The Nexus will house the new Alliance Council, Wright said. A council based not on historical power or tradition, but on contribution and commitment to our shared future. Captain Curtis, standing near Rogers, leaned in. This is the real test, she whispered. Will they accept a true partnership, or cling to the old power structures? The High Counselor studied the plans carefully. Then he looked up at Wright. You wish to replace the Confederation entirely? We wish to evolve it, Wright corrected, into something stronger, something that truly serves all species. Silence fell over the chamber. This was the moment that would determine the galaxy's path forward. Then from the back of the chamber, a small delegate stood up. Rogers recognized the species, one of the newer, less powerful members that had suffered heavily in the Krivik invasion. My world was among the first to fall to the Krivik, the delegate said. We had no defenses worthy of the name. The Confederation could not help us, would not help us. But humans came. They evacuated our children. They fought to reclaim our home. They asked for nothing in return. The delegate looked around the chamber. I do not fear human power. I fear returning to a system that left us defenseless for centuries. One by one, other delegates rose in support, not just the smaller species, but major powers as well. The momentum was building. The High Counselor raised his hands for silence. It seems the will of this body is clear. He turned to Wright. Admiral, the Confederation accepts your proposal. The Galactic Alliance will rise from the foundations we built, but with a new vision for the future. Wright nodded. Thank you, High Counselor. As the formal vote began, Rogers slipped out of the chamber with Curtis and Grev. They walked to a viewport overlooking the shipyards where vessels from dozens of species were being upgraded with new technology. Did you ever doubt this would work? Grev asked. Rogers smiled. Every day for the first month. Curtis leaned against the viewport. The hard part is just beginning. We've freed the galaxy from one threat, but new challenges will emerge. That's why humanity did what we did. Came a voice behind them. They turned to see Wright approaching, having left the chamber as the vote continued. We knew we couldn't defeat the Krivik alone, she said. Not in the long term. We needed a true alliance, not a stagnant confederation, but a dynamic partnership of species committed to growth and exploration. She looked out at the ships below. For centuries, the stars belonged to those who wished to keep others grounded. Now they belong to those with the courage to reach for them. Around them, the station hummed with activity. Engineers from 20 species worked together on new designs. Medical teams shared breakthroughs. Children from worlds that had once been enemies played in specially designed common areas. The moment humans walked away, Rogers said quietly, fear gripped the Galactic Council. Wright nodded, and in that fear they found the strength to change. Outside the viewport, a new ship rose from the construction bay, sleek and powerful, bearing the insignia of the Galactic Alliance. Its name, painted across the hull in multiple languages, caught the light as it turned. Unity. The first of a new fleet. The beginning of a new era.